All right. Good morning, everyone. How's spring break? Good. Refreshing, relaxing. No. Fun, productive. All kinds of adjectives we could use to describe spring break. Maybe a little bit of each. Well, I hope whatever it was you're going for was good. Welcome back. We've got not less than half of the semester left, which is kind of wild, right? But we got lots to cover and lots of exciting things to do, and that's all right. That's good. So let's get into it. We're starting in the nervous system today. I made the executive decision to skip over, well, as you know, in this class, we don't cover everything in the textbook. It's simply too much material to cover reasonably in a semester. We could cover it, but then lectures would be going at about twice the pace they're going now, and it would be pretty bonkers. So I've made the decision in structuring the class that we're structuring things to make sure to go at a pace that's reasonable and to make sure you understand things rather than just cover as much material as possible. So with that in mind, there's some things we don't cover. And there's a couple of lectures I had planned on the muscles of the head and neck and face, and we're going to skip that. I'm not going to include that in course content this semester. I want to keep us on track and make sure we get to some other topics later in the semester. So just know that there's material on that in the textbook, covered that in past years, but I want to make the trade-off and make sure we can cover some other things later in the semester, specifically get a little bit into the endocrine system and the reproductive system. This is fun. This is like a therapy thing to like take apart a skull while you're talking to people. You should make these as like stress, instead of like a stress ball, you get like a stress skull. And you're like, oh man, if I could just get this right parietal bone off and go. So we're gonna do that. So let's talk about nervous system. Here's the deal. Today's agenda looks like this. We're gonna play a game called Name That Bone, which is like the game show Name That Tune, which has not been on TV for like 40 years, 30-ish years. Is Name That Tune a thing anymore? Blank stares, probably not. Okay. They used to like do this thing where they have people and they'd have somebody playing the piano and they'd like play one note on the piano and then people would have to try to guess the song, and then they'd play two notes and have to guess the song. TV was super exciting back in the 80s. Anyway, we're gonna channel that energy into bones today. Play a game called Name That Bone. And then we're going to review your ticket out before break, right before break. And I'm going to share with you your results of quiz number 3. And then we're going to get into the nervous system, including activities and a study guide for you as well in the same format as I've done with previous study guides with most recently the bones of the skull. Damn it, this friggin' right parietal bone. Just won't, there we go. The sutures. All right, and then I've got a closing slide. There's no ticket out on this closing slide, but there's a cartoon that's a little bit funny. So look forward to that. That was a great endorsement, huh? Okay, this is what we're gonna do to start. We're gonna play a game called Name That Bone, and this is the way this game is gonna work. I'm gonna give you each pair of you a bone, which explains why I've been, ooh, I just broke the, I don't know that. Okay, I'm gonna give each pair of you a bone, and you are going to take a 1 minute and you are going to indicate what bone it is with your partner. And I want you to work together, try to figure this out. I've got a box of skull bones over here. And after 1 minute, we're gonna rotate bones. You're gonna get a new bone. So you're gonna get 3 bones total. Each one you have a minute to identify. So take some notes. After we do the activity, I'm gonna ask you some questions about what bone you had and that kind of thing. So just a way to kind of re-engage. I wanna just start things off after break. Just refresh your brain on what we were covering before break. Get a little hands-on experience. Sound good? All right, I'll just go around and give you bones and have you be in pairs. Reese and Joe, I'm gonna start you up tough one there. Dan, you guys. You know what? Actually, let's do. Sam and Casey and then Meg. If it is so let's do. I saw the. All right, I'm gonna come back to you and okay, actually, great. All right. So I'm going to set the timer. Discuss it with your partner. Look it up. I mean, look stuff up if you want to. Like, it's not a test, so figure out what it is. All right, let's pause here, bring it back. Some of you got this right away, some of you didn't. Go ahead and pass your bone to the group on your right. And so you guys pass it this way. I don't know how this is gonna work. Just get a new bone. How's that for good teaching? I'm gonna reset this. All right, wait, I messed up. Who's got an extra bone? You have 3 of them. Oh, no, you already did this one. Who doesn't have a bone? And who's got another extra bone?
No, you're fine.
What do you guys got there? It's in that area. No, it's a big shrimp, so it's called something that. It is. I've been trying to get them changed. What do you guys got there?
I know.
You got it. So you got it. Oh, this is proving challenging. This is like name that tune, but you guys are getting like whole chords. All right, let's do it again. All right, this time. All right, I'm going to organize this better. So, all right, front row, pass down to the right. And then you guys pass back. And then you guys, middle row, pass down to your left. And then you guys pass back. And then back row, pass down to your right. And I will grab your bone here. And I'll bring it down to these guys. Oh, why is it so here, just swap with somebody. Give me a new bone. I'll help. You guys need a new bone?
Yeah, got it, you're good. It was really funny. I did mine. So we only had for like 3 hours. But it was pretty good. We were trying
You guys got this? All right, let's pass your bones over this way towards Casey and Sam, if you would. So this was challenging, huh? Some of you here, I'm gonna use this parietal bone as a towel. There you go. So challenging activity. Some of them were easy, easier than others. I'll say, like we got the mandible, but the point of this is to just refresh your memory, get you some hands-on work with these pieces of bone, and know that our lab, not tomorrow, we have one more lab on muscles to cover, but the lab the following week will be on the skull. So we'll be getting into this in more detail. So if you're a little foggy on this now, that's okay, but use that as a motivator to be like, oh, I gotta review this stuff, I gotta know it. Also, we're just coming back from spring break, which is why we're doing this activity now instead of, for example, having a test on this right now. So you can, if you don't mind, just, do I have all the bones here? Are they all passed up? Don't, please don't. Yeah, keep the sphenoid. Let's see. This is actually the inferior nasal conduct. Yeah, anybody else have a bone for me? All right. So, oh, more bones. We got a maxilla and all right. So let's do this. Let's continue just kind of refreshing our memory a little bit. One of the questions, these are the questions out from the class right before spring break. I mean, not the last class, which was the quiz, but that Wednesday. And the question was, with which bones does a parietal bone articulate? I want to make sure most of you got the correct answer here. Parietal bone is this guy. Actually, I can show you in a diagram here. It articulates with the frontal bone, the occipital bone, the other parietal bone, and the temporal bone. So basically all of the bones of the cranium, and then also with the sphenoid bone. And so just to refresh your memory, the parietal bone is this guy. You notice it's articulating with the occipital, temporal, frontal. This is the sphenoid bone right here. So it's got all of those articulations. So just make sure you've got that. Most of you got this one right. All of you said that it articulates with the frontal bone. Excellent. But notice here, only like 2/3 of you said sphenoid bone. So just make sure, if you got questions like that, make sure you're thinking in 3D, thinking about all the bones with which it articulates. The other question was, which bones of the cranium does the sphenoid bone articulate? That is this guy. Remember, this is the one that looks very different depending on what angle you're looking at it from. And the answer was all of those bones listed. Also, I messed up and I didn't include the zygomatic bones on there as well. So it also articulates with the zygomatic bone. So remember, the sphenoid bone is kind of considered this keystone bone, and it has these articulations with all these other bones. It forms the back of the eye socket. It's got the sella turcica, which is where your pituitary gland sits. We'll talk about that when we get to the brain in a couple weeks. And it's not a huge bone, but it's got this funky shape and articulates with a whole bunch of other bones. And if we go back to the diagram here, you can see the sphenoid bone in yellow. So remember that the part of the sphenoid bone that's lateral here articulates with the temporal, parietal, frontal bones, the zygomatic bone right there. And then if we look at the skull, this is a transverse section of the skull looking down, so an inferior view. You can see it articulates with the occipital bone back here as well as your ethmoid bone up there. So it's got a lot of articulations. Got another nice diagram of it here. Again, just pointing out that when you look at this from different angles, you can see different parts of the bone. So if you're looking front on the skull, you can see a little bit of it here in the temples and then behind the eye sockets. But if you have a sagittal section through the skull, you can see it right there in the middle. So it's a weird one. Just make sure you know where that guy articulates. Questions on the sphenoid or the parietal bones, articulations of the skull? Okay. So just want to review, the last class was your quiz on that Friday before break. Here's the distribution of scores for the quiz. These are available in Blackboard. I tried to set it up so that when you go to Blackboard, you can see the answers that you got right and wrong. For some reason, this is giving me all kinds of consternation this semester. If it's not working, just let me know and I'll fix it. But it has to, well, not going to, it's a weird technical thing with Blackboard, but if it's not working the way I want it to, just let me know. Overall, the class did great. The mean score was just shy of 27 out of 30, which is about a 90%, which is pretty dang good. You can see the distribution of scores here. So these are your grades on the x-axis. The y-axis is how many people got those grades. So 10 of you, in other words, got somewhere between a 28 and a 30, and so on. You can see the average right there. So overall, you guys did a great work with that. It's nice to see before spring break. And as I said, let me know if the correct answers are not in Blackboard. And note too, if you're falling off on the far end of this distribution here with your score, good time to think about how you're reviewing material, maybe visit open hours, make sure you're getting what you need, because we will have an exam on this material coming up, and that exam will not be open book. So just make sure that you're getting it as you go. Kind of treat the quizzes are kind of like almost like a study activity. With the open book quizzes, get you ready for the exam, which will be in a couple weeks. Questions? I'm going to give format of the exam on Wednesday's class. I was actually just thinking about this morning, but tentatively I'll say yes. I'm going to do an in-class exam, in-class closed book exam for the next exam, which I know you're super stoked for. Yeah, let's do it. No, wait, that was the quiz. I was going to do that. Let me tell you Wednesday. I was just thinking the opposite. I just told you the exact opposite of what I planned this morning. This is one of those days where anything that comes out of my mouth is the opposite. But the quiz, I believe I'll do closed book in here. And then the exam, I'm thinking of, without making a firm commitment to anybody, that we'll do that one online as well at the end of the month, at the last class of the month. Cool. But that is a great way to make everybody happy, right? Yeah.
Is this quiz on Friday?
No, it won't be Friday. Yeah, I'll map out the, it's tomorrow. No, it's right now. No, I'll map out everything. Actually, I was brainstorming what the next couple weeks of class are going to look like this morning. So I'll share. There is no lab quiz tomorrow either. Yeah. Yeah. You have no quizzes this week. No, none. Just make that clear. All right, so I'd like you to, instead of doing a ticket out today, I wanted you to reflect on the activity we just did. So please take 3 minutes and answer a handful of questions about that activity, and then we'll get into the nervous system. Trying to remember which bone you had. Yeah, that's why I did this now instead of at the end of class, because then there's no way you can remember. Do your best, do your best. Great.
No, this is,
All right, looks like most of you got that. Let me give you another second to finish up. Still see a few people using their thumbs. Although it's hard, I know, when you pick up your phone to like do something and then you're like, oh, I got a message from this cool person I want to reply to my mom, and you have to write back to your mom. So your mom gets mad if you don't reply too soon. Although I've been really good at training my mom not to expect and write back within days. All right, let's start on the nervous system. So the nervous system is our next major unit is going to be the nervous system. We're going to talk generally about the nervous system as a whole thing, and then we'll get into some details, especially on the brain and the spinal cord. And we'll do that both in lecture and in lab over the coming weeks. The nervous system, basically what the nervous system does is it takes information from the environment, processes it, and then gets your body to do something in response. So it's basically this kind of one way, well, I guess it is kind of cyclical because how you move or do things affects the sensory input. But this is the basic schematic of what happens in your nervous system. Now, what's really important to note here is that your sensory input comes from your environment. So this is kind of obvious things like the example here, somebody seeing, in this case, a glass of water or other clear liquid, we don't know what that is. And that sensory input goes through specialized cells in the eye, travels to the central nervous system, and then which sends a signal to the arm to move that glass of water. What I want to emphasize is a couple things. First of all, is that sensory input comes from the environment, but that can also be the internal environment. You're constantly getting information about the world around you, but also the world inside you. For example, your blood pressure, or what is happening in your digestive system, or even how far your joints are extended, or where your body is in space. And so I really want to make clear that sensory input includes information from the world around you and the world inside of you. The motor output is actually a little bit simpler in the sense that basically you can do two things in the world. Your nervous system tells your body to do two things. One of those things is to contract a muscle. The other thing is to tell a gland to produce a hormone or another fluid or whatever, like your sweat glands or something like that. But that's basically it. That's basically your only way of interacting with the world. at least through the voluntary nervous system. So in that sense, this output signal is pretty straightforward. And most of the time, what we're going to talk about is motor output to your muscles anyway. So that part of it is pretty, it's kind of surprisingly simple. Like if we think about all the ways we interact with the world, really, it's just about moving muscles. So that is the gist of it. As we get into detail, I have a study guide here for you. Again, these are some slides in Google Slides. Let me get out of the way. They are provide a lot of the diagrams. I didn't label all of the diagrams, or I left some blanks so you could fill those in as we go through. Again, just kind of want to make things simpler for you. This is my way of compromising. Some of you have asked for lecture slides, which I don't really like to share for a couple of reasons, but this is a way to get you that information, the important stuff, without worrying about the lecture slides. So this will cover us through the next couple of days, at least. The study guide there, you can take it and do what you will with it. Sound good? Cool. All right. So walking through this diagram again, what happens here is that these sensory receptors, which can take a whole bunch of different forms. This can be specialized cells like in the eyes or the ear. It can be generalized sensory detection cells like proprioceptors in your skin or your joints, etc. And this monitors changes in the environment, which are called stimuli. So that's a term in red there, which means it's important. You should know it. And as I said, both inside and outside and from the body. And all of this information is what we call sensory input. Step 2 is then the nervous system processes and interprets this sensory information and decides what, if any, action should take. So basically, we get all this information, we got to figure out what to do with it, and then we got to figure out what that thing is that we're going to do. And this happens in the central nervous system and primarily here in the brain, although there are small reflex arcs through the spinal cord, and sometimes that information doesn't even go all the way to the brain. But most of that happens in the brain. So you get information from the world, inside and outside, you bring it to your brain kind of makes sense of all of that, because remember, all of this information is pouring in simultaneously, right? So and sometimes it can be contradictory. Let's say that you touch something that you think is going to be really cold and it's actually really hot. It takes a little bit of time for your central nervous system to integrate that conflicting information. I don't know if anyone's ever, if you do something like that. I'm trying to think of another example that maybe happens more often. If you drink something and you expect it to be one thing and it's something else, and it really it's really disconcerting at first because you're like, what is this thing that I just drank? Finally, the third step is this motor output, right? And that's the response which activates these effector organs, which are muscles and glands. I'm going to break this up into more detail, but this is everything we do in the nervous system it can be brought back to one of these three processes. So let's talk about how the nervous system is divided anatomically first. And the most basic distinction is between the central and the peripheral nervous system. So the central nervous system, or the CNS as it's often called, includes simply the brain and spinal cord. And this is the integration center and the integration and command center. This is where that sensory input, where you make sense of it. And this is where you make decisions about what to do. Now, the brain is obviously situated up there in your cranium. The spinal cord then extends down from the posterior, the posterior inferior region of the brain, and extends down inside your vertebrae down to about midway through your lumbar vertebrae in your back, right? The peripheral nervous system, or the PNS, consists of the nerves that extend from the central nervous system. And so these are nerves that extend from the brain, which are called cranial nerves, and nerves that extend from the spinal cord, which are called, cleverly, the spinal nerves. And they also, in part of these, this system includes these clusters of cell bodies called ganglia. Now, I haven't told you what a cell body is yet. It's basically the main, I'll call it that, the main part of a neuron. We're going to talk about that in detail. So don't worry about if the term cell body doesn't make a lot of sense yet. But I want you to know that there's clusters of these cell bodies called ganglia in the peripheral nervous system. And basically, the peripheral nervous system links the sensory nervous system to the outside world. That delivers information to the central nervous system, and then delivers information from the central nervous system. I'm going to show you what this looks like in diagrammatic form. So this is looking at a person from the posterior view, and you can see the brain and spinal cord are part of the central nervous system. I've got a little bit of embryology on here. Don't worry about this for this unit. I've mentioned where these cells are derived from, the neuroectoderm, and that the peripheral nervous system is derived from both the neuroectoderm. Oh, I got a spelling mistake there. This should be ectoderm, not ectoderm. Should be a D there. In any event, don't worry about that. Just a little bit of information to bring this back to embryology. The important thing here is that you can recognize what's what looking at this anatomically. So you've got the brain and spinal cord, essential nervous system. The peripheral nervous system is all of these nerves extending from there and throughout the body, as well as these kind of collections of cell bodies called ganglia. We'll talk about in just a second. We good so far? Making sense? Cool. All right, so let's talk about input and output. Sensory input is also known as afferent or afferent signals. The two terms, afferent and efferent, sound very, very similar. I'm probably going to pronounce them as afferent and efferent, just to emphasize which one I'm talking about. This is one of those terms in anatomy I hate, where you have two things that sound like almost identical, but mean the exact opposite of each other, right? So sensory is afferent, and these are signals that are picked up by these receptors and carried by these nerve fibers, these neurons, from the peripheral nervous system to the central nervous system. So it's information coming in, basically. On the other hand, motor or efferent signals are carried away from the CNS by other nerve fibers to the peripheral nervous system, and then ultimately to muscles and glands, as I mentioned. Now, one word on here I really want to emphasize that is easy to gloss over is this word, other. Nerves are one-way streets. Neurons always send a signal in one direction only. In other words, the nerves that are bringing information to your central nervous system are different from those that are delivering information away from the central nervous system. So nerves are a one-way street. I think that's like the title of a song from the 80s too. I'm sure that it is. It's like an old Hall & Oates song or something. If it's not, it should be, and I should write it. Got that? I'll show you another diagram. Dan, go ahead.
No, I was just.
It is a Hall & Oates song?
No.
No, okay, sorry. Yeah, got excited there. I was like.
Last slide. Yes.
Okay, so let's take a look at this then. Sensory is afferent, right? Bringing information in. So this is the slide we started with. We have the integration center, and then we have the motor or efferent nerves. Remember that when I say delivering information to and away, I'm using the central nervous system as the reference here, right? Because that's kind of like, I don't know, I guess it's what we think of as ourself is associated primarily with the brain more than anything else. So that's a general division. We're going to divide this up and divide it up a bunch more times here as we move through. So let me see, what do I want to talk about here? Okay, so we have these sensory and motor nerves. We can further subdivide each of those categories into two other divisions. The first is somatic. So somatic refers to the general body. And these are the nerves that are associated with primarily from your experience of the outside world, although not entirely. So for example, nerves in your skin delivering information in, and then the somatic nerves that are the somatic efferent nerves, the motor nerves, are going to innervate your skeletal muscle. So this is going to be this is going to provide for voluntary motion. So the somatic motor nerves are what delivers information to the muscles that you're consciously thinking about and controlling. So when I move my arms, that is being dictated by information in these somatic motor nerves. Yeah.
Are those the only places they occur in striated muscle and tight nervous system, or are there other places? And those are just examples.
Great question. So this is actually a little complicated of an answer. For the sensory somatic nerves, this is an example. There are others. So for example, the nerves associated with the eyes and ears, etc. For motor, somatic motor nerves, it is only to your skeletal muscle. So this is your voluntary system. Your smooth muscle, your cardiac muscle, and your glands, you can't consciously control. You can't be like, I'm gonna sweat. Maybe indirectly. Maybe some of you can. I don't know. Be sweet if you. Well, never mind. I don't know where that was going. It wouldn't really be. Would it be sweet? It'd be like a cool party trick, but I
From
don't.
a certain point of view.
Yeah, it would. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like it wouldn't be like you're not gonna pray people and be like, oh damn, that guy can sweat on command. He's awesome. All right, yes, and then the somatic motor nerves are just going to your those skeletal muscles. The other division is called the visceral division, and again, we have sensory and motor nerves associated with the visceral system. Visceral basically refers to your guts, right? And so this is going to be delivering information from inside the body. There's some poorly drawn organs here. This is a bladder, so information from your bladder to your brain, your heart, your digestive system here. Is in the visceral category. And then the efferent nerves from the visceral category, the motor nerves, are going to innervate things like glands and smooth muscle and cardiac muscle, things that you're not consciously thinking about or controlling unless you're our friend that can sweat on command. If you guys know anybody like that, let me know, because I'd like to bring this person into anatomy class to demonstrate. Be cool. All right. So let's look at all of this together on a single diagram. So I'm presenting here no new information, just kind of integrating those slides together here. Notice that we have in blue, we have your sensory nerves. So these are delivering information to the central nervous system. Somatic sensory, basically more or less information from the outside world. We have the skin there. Visceral sensory from inside your body. You got a stomach right there. And then in red here, you see these motor or efferent neurons, or nerves rather. And you see that the somatic motor is your voluntary system. So that's going to the skeletal muscle, looks like a bicep maybe. And then we have the visceral motor, which is going in this case to the heart. Sorry, that slide got cut off. The heart and the bladder. So these are, again, this is what you're not voluntarily controlling. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit here about these sensory nerves next, and then we'll move and talk about the motor nerves. There we go. Questions so far? All right, I'm going to take this information, kind of put it in a flow chart form, right? So we've got the peripheral nervous system at the top here. Everything is going in and out of the peripheral nervous system. We have the sensory division here, which is bringing information to that central nervous system. And then we have the motor division, which is delivering information from the peripheral nervous, or from the central nervous system, right? So then here, well, this is what I covered already. Let me make sure I'm saying what I want to say here about this. Yeah, so this is basically just a repeat of what I said. The somatic nervous system is conducting impulses from the CNS to the skeletal muscles, and the autonomic nervous system, or the visceral nervous system, is delivering impulses from the central nervous system to this heart, glands, smooth muscle, and stuff like that, that you don't think about, you can't consciously control. So let me pause there, let you get that in. Then I have another diagram that gets into even more detail. We started off general and we're kind of getting smaller and smaller. I'm going to put all of this together for you in one complete diagram. And that looks like this. So we've got the central nervous up top, we've got our peripheral nervous system, and then that's divided into sensory and motor. The motor is further divided into somatic and autonomic. That was all on the previous slide I just covered. What I'm adding here is that the autonomic nervous system is further divided into the sympathetic and the parasympathetic divisions. Now we talk about this in physiology class, and I'm going to get into a little more detail here. The takeaway message is this, is the autonomic nervous system. So again, that part of the nervous system that you're not consciously controlling is divided into two anatomical and functional units or divisions, right? One of them, the sympathetic division, is primarily associated with your response to stressors in the world. You can think of stress starts with an S, sympathetic starts with an S. So that's like what initiates the famous like fight or flight response, or if you're dealing with any perceived stress in the world. So this can be something like fighting a bear, or it can be being nervous that your human anatomy teacher just told you your next exam is going to be closed book in class, right? That's the sympathetic system. The parasympathetic division is commonly called the rest and digest. So this is this promotes the functionality of things that basically help restore you, help you recharge, energize, get energy that you need. So literally resting and digesting. I'm not going to talk about this too much in this class, but I do want you to know that general division. Now, what's important to note here is this is kind of these functional divisions. But what I want you to know, since this is a human anatomy class, what I want to emphasize is that these are anatomical divisions as well. These are different nerves that are doing these different things. Nerves are not good at multitasking. Nerves are exquisitely good at one thing and one thing only, and that is delivering information in one direction. And so they're not going to multitask. And so those nerves that are associated with the sympathetic division are different from those of the parasympathetic. Those nerves, the sensory nerves that deliver information to the central nervous system, are different anatomical structures than the nerves that are delivering information, for example, to your skeletal muscle, in the case of the somatic efferent nerves, or the heart, for example, in terms of the visceral efferent nerves. So these are different structural units as well.
The visceral efferent, the ones that you say control glands, are those the same ones that control the smooth muscle as well?
Yes, that's correct. Yep, all the involuntary stuff basically, and that is somatic, or no, the visceral motor. Yep, this guy right here. So conducts impulses from the CNS, the cardiac muscles, smooth muscles, and glands. Yep, good question. So let me look at this. Well, let me actually pause there because I want to get into just a tiny bit more detail in a second. Questions on this overall structure? Cool. All right. A little more information here is the somatic sensory. So remember that this is the information coming mostly from the outside world to the central nervous system. This has three more components. We have what's called the general somatic senses. So this is what I've been using as an example. These are receptors spread throughout what I'm saying here is the outer tube of the body, the outside of the body. And these are sensory cells that are sensitive to things like touch, pain, vibration, pressure, temperature. In this case, general just means kind of widespread. So these, you can think of these as a lot of the specialized nerve cells throughout your skin, right? And your skin is good at feeling not only touch, but it can feel differences in temperature. It can sense vibrations. It can sense hot and cold, et cetera, et cetera. That's temperature, I guess. Next, we have the proprioceptive senses. So these are those nerves that are associated with telling you where your body is in space. And so they're associated with how far tendons are stretching, how far joints are moving, which I guess is the same as how far tendons are stretching, et cetera, et cetera. So this is basically what helps you know where you are. And you can think about this developmentally when like little kids, when they're born or learning to do stuff, they kind of, their proprioceptive senses kind of suck, right? Like little kids, you ever watch them try to do stuff and they just really can't control their body very well? Well, that's because this is just developing. They'll get there eventually. And finally, we have special somatic senses. So these are associated with just two sense organs, specifically the eye and the ear. They are somatic senses and they're just very specialized, meaning they're only found in one place in your body. What's important to note here is that they're only found in two places, the ear and the eye, right? But there's three senses that they are associated with. That is vision, which of course is in the eye, but then both hearing and balance, which are in the ear. So your ear, we most commonly think of the ear as being associated with hearing, but the ear is also very important for maintaining your sense of balance and basically where your body is in relation to the Earth's gravity. And those both happen in the ear. And again, these are somatic senses. So this is all somatic sensory nerves or somatic afferent nerves. I'm going to transition now and move from somatic sensory to visceral sensory. And there's two subdivisions of this. Again, we have general visceral senses, which includes stretch, pain, temperature, nausea, hunger. And this is specifically associated with your internal organs. So when I say stretching, I'm talking about how far your stomach is distended after you've just eaten a birthday cake, or your bladder when it's getting towards the end of class and you really have to use the restroom. But also internal temperature. This is also the nerves that are responsible for feelings like hunger and nausea associated with the digestive system. And again, I want to just note that general means here that they're kind of found throughout a whole bunch of organs, specifically digestive, urinary, and I haven't talked about it yet, but these are important for your reproductive organs as well. In addition to these general visceral senses, we have two special visceral senses as well. And special, again, here means these are localized, only found in one place, and that is those nerves associated with the senses of taste and smell, which are very closely associated and integrated in the nervous system as well. We won't get into that in this class, but it's really hard to taste things if you can't smell. Okay, so far we've covered maybe I should write this out here. Well, I guess I have it on the slides here. Let me just go back to the slide. All right, so far we've covered the somatic sensory. Remember, there's 3 divisions there. And the visceral sensory, there's 2 divisions there. I'm going to move now and talk about, so I have a slide, there we go. I'm going to talk now about, this is off, but the somatic motor and the visceral motor sections. So we have these 3 somatic sensory divisions. We have the 2 visceral sensory we just covered, and I want to talk about motor. So the visceral motor is what makes up the autonomic nervous system. So remember, that means that this is the stuff you don't control. And as I mentioned, it's divided into the sympathetic and parasympathetic divisions. And what these guys do is they regulate the contraction of smoother cardiac muscles, so the involuntary contraction, and they also control those visceral organs. So it's often called the involuntary nervous system because it's stuff that can't consciously control it. For example, you're not consciously controlling your stomach churning or peristalsis moving food through your small intestine or things like that. And I think we're out of time. Snap. Okay. I'm going to have an activity here, but maybe we can lead off class next time with this activity. Then we're going to get into details of the nervous system. I want to wrap things up. I don't have a ticket out today, but just let me share a last slide here. Look at all this stuff we're going to do. Oh, great. No ticket out today. Remember, we have lab tomorrow. And just a reminder, if you have questions about stuff, I do have open hours today, noon to 2. Otherwise, we will pick back up talking about the nervous system generally on Wednesday. No quiz in lab tomorrow. No quiz this week. No quiz, no quiz, no quiz. That'll change next week, though, but we'll take it. Thanks, everybody.